Sam Harris doesn't know his butt from his elbow. This is the shocking revelation coming into you today from the Scottish Liberty podcast with me, Tom Laird.
And me, Antony Sammeroff.
Sam Harris, as we all know, a highly intelligent guy, personally I think the brightest of the three horsemen of the apocalypse when it came to the new atheists. You had Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, and Sam Harris. And I think of the three, Sam Harris was the guy who took on religion on its philosophical content, which is basically what you have to do. Don't agree with them, but certainly the brightest tool in the box. But here today, Antony Sammeroff is here to tell us all why he really doesn't know what he's talking about. Sorry, that's Sam Harris doesn't know what he's talking about, not Antony Sammeroff doesn't know what he's talking about. Sam Harris doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to economics. Antony, shocking revelation. Tell us more.
Well, Sam Harris is never done talking on his podcast about how mechanization and AI is going to bring doom upon the earth if we don't get some government to save us from that doom.
Okay, AI being artificial intelligence.
That's right, and artificial intelligence may someday replace a lot of the work that is currently being done by human beings, just as the automobile has made the horse-drawn carriage outdated, and soon even our automobiles might be driving themselves and will save on a lot of accidents. But what Sam Harris has to say reminds me very strongly of the Bastiat quote, the great classic liberal economist Bastiat. "We must admit our opponents have a marked advantage over us. They need only utter a few words to set forth a half-truth, whereas in order to show that it's a half-truth, we must have recourse to long and dry dissertations." In economics, everything is not about the apparent consequences of some action or policy, but about the knock-on consequences of that action and policy. So it's very easy to make a very convincing sounding argument in economics, like,
right,
you know, if we take some money from over here and put it over there, it will create jobs, not realizing that you have to lose jobs to create those jobs and so forth. And you can't blame an intelligent guy like Sam Harris for having the common misconceptions that we're going to go into about economics in this episode. But I guess you can blame him because it's his job to go and take a second look.
Yeah.
So shall we just roll the clip and see what Sam Harris has to say before we break it down?
Roll the clip.
We need a new ethic that and politics that decouples a person's claim on existence from doing profitable work that someone will pay you for, because a lot of that work is going away.
Well, what are your thoughts on universal basic income? Because bring it back to that with this rise of the machines. If we do have things automated, I mean, some ridiculous number of people make their living driving cars and driving trucks. Now, when those jobs are gone, I think it's millions of people, right?
Yeah,
isn't it?
No, and I think it is in the States. It's the most common job for white men. I think it's something like 9 million white men are driving trucks and cars.
The problem with that is most people are like, fuck white men.
Yeah. Well,
tired of white men. We're the patriarchy.
This is you know, Trump's base.
Yeah.
I think universal basic income, there are reasons to worry that it's not a perfect solution, because you want to incentivize the things you want to incentivize. You need to just understand the consequences of any system you would put in place. But there's just no question that, viewed as an opportunity, this is the greatest opportunity in human history. We're talking about canceling the need for dangerous, boring, repetitive work and freeing up humanity to do interesting, creative, fun things. Now, how could that be bad? Well, give us a little time and we'll show you how we can make it bad. And it'll be bad if it leads to just, extraordinary wealth inequality that we don't have the political or ethical will to fix. And because if we have a culture of people who think, I don't want any handouts, and I certainly don't want my neighbor to get any handouts, and I don't want to pay any taxes so that he can be a lazy bum. If we have this, hangover from Calvinism, that makes it impossible to talk creatively and reasonably about what has changed, yeah, it could be a very painful bottleneck we have to pass through until we get to something that is much better or a hell of a lot worse, depending on where the technology goes. And I think at a certain point, the wealth inequality will be obviously unsustainable. I mean, you can't have multiple trillionaires walking around, living in compounds with razor wire, and just moving everywhere by private jet, and then massive levels of unemployment in a society like ours. I mean, at a certain point, where the richest people will realize that enough is enough. We have to spread this wealth, because otherwise people are just going to show up at our compounds with their AR-15s or their pitchforks, and the society will not sustain it. I mean, you can't. There has to be some level of wealth inequality that is unsustainable, that people will not tolerate. And you begin to look more and more like a banana republic until you become a banana republic. But now we're talking about, the U.S. or the developed world where all the wealth is. So redistribution is the end game. But that's a toxic concept for half of the country right now.
Right, the idea of the welfare state, the idea of perpetuating that and spreading it across the board.
Yeah, I mean, whatever the solution is for coal mining, we should not be hostage, for the coal miners, we should not be hostage to the idea that they need jobs, so that whatever job they were doing and are still qualified to do, that job has to continue to exist no matter what the environmental consequences, no matter what the health consequences, no matter how it closes the door to good things that we want. We don't do that with anything. We didn't do that with the people who are making buggy whips or anything else.
Or slavery.
Yeah, I mean, there's no. At a certain point, we move on and we make progress, and we don't let that progress get rolled back. And when you're talking about developing technology that produces energy that doesn't have any of these negative effects, whether it's global climate change or just pollution, of course we have to move in that direction. And the other thing that's crazy is that we're not talking honestly about how the dirty tech is subsidized. I mean, you have the oil people say, well, solar is all subsidized, right? This is, it's just a government handout that's giving us the solar industry. Well, one, that's not even you have to produce an argument as to why that's a bad thing. This is something we should want the government to do. The government needs to incentivize new industries that the market can't incentivize now if they are industries that are just intrinsically good and are going to lead to the betterment of humanity. But carbon is massively subsidized. We don't have. I mean, if we actually had the coal producers and the petroleum producers pay for the consequences of carbon and pollution, it would be much more expensive than it is, right? So it's already subsidized. We should. I mean, we need a carbon tax. Clearly, we need to. I mean, the tax code should incentivize what we want to incentivize.
Okay, Antony, a lot to deal with there. So many problems. Where shall we start? Okay, let's deal with this idea that these trillionaires are going to be in control of all the machines, and it's going to create massive wealth inequality.
Okay, so this is an interesting point, and it's not the first time that Sam Harris or someone on his podcast has made it. One of his guest, Yuval Harari, said, "The danger is that automation and the rise of AI will create the most unequal society that has ever been created." Now, the irony is, of course, that automation has created the most equal society that's ever been created. Okay. In the old days, a rich person used to ride around in a carriage with 4 horses, whereas a poor person walked everywhere. Now, even people on low incomes have a car. Now, a rich person might have a Maserati, but it's comparably equal. You've got a flush toilet, a rich person's got a flush toilet. Yeah. They can't get a much better mattress or internet connection than you. You've got a washing machine, dishwasher, vacuum cleaner.
You've got a laptop, Bill Gates has got a laptop.
Exactly, and anyone could make a podcast like this, given that they've got a reasonable standard of living. Before, only rich people had access to making media and things like that. So materially, we live in the most equal society ever created, and that is because machines allowed one person to do the work that hundreds of people used to do, which drove down the cost of buying goods to a point where they're affordable to everyone. Now, as another thing that happened, the average work week plummeted from 57 hours in 1870 to maybe 37 to 42 hours today. And poor people's children used to work. Now the children are in school. If the children were still working, their parents might only be working 25 hours. So this shows that automation has created not only an equal society, but a society where regular people have leisure time. Consuming art used to just be something that aristocrats could do. Creating art, only something that aristocrats could do. Now you've got access to listening to symphonies, operas, all of this stuff that only rich people could access, and all of this is because of automation. The fear is, of course, that as automation will continue, these jobs will disappear. But the thing is, that's a Marxist misconception, because it only looks at people in their capacities as workers. It doesn't also look at them in their other capacity, which is as consumers. So because the price of goods is coming down, people will have to work less to earn the amount of money that it costs to make a living. So these truck drivers that are going out of business, that means the trucking industry has one less expense, which is to pay their workers, which means that all the goods in the supermarket are cheaper. So what should happen is the number of hours that people need to work will gradually taper off until it gets to that point that Murray Rothbard envisioned, where he said, until the day when you just imagine a Coke and it appears in your mouth, there will always be the need for human labour. It's not like class sizes are too small, you know? We could have one teacher to every child. We could have several teachers to every child if there's no factory jobs or service jobs left. It's not like there's too few lonely old people. People can go into the old age home and read those people's stories, because they only need to be paid the most meager amount in order to make a living. It's not like there's too few nurses, too few doctors, and people can make art for each other.
But do we accept at least maybe the point that in the initial stages of automation, then there will be unemployment while people retrain, and not everybody's going to be able to retrain. I mean, your average truck driver is not necessarily going to be able to retrain as a nurse or
well, he's not going to be retrained if the progressives have their way and they institute a $15 minimum wage, living wage, because no one is going to pay you $15 an hour to train you. They might pay you $5 an hour to train you because you're not making them any money while they're training you. Then once you've got those skills, you can choose another job. So if there's a very high barriers to employing people, lots of labour laws, very high minimum wages, then it's going to be hard for the economy to reabsorb workers. But if it's a relatively free market or a free market, then employers will pay people to train. And also you need to remember that a lot of jobs would not exist if not for automation. I mean, a CAT scan operator, someone who makes a microchip, these are things that you can't do without machines. So automation always creates new jobs. The best way to deal with the transition is not to incentivize companies to adopt the machine sooner by high minimum wages, because if the minimum wage is too high, then they'll just go, well, I'm not going to employ a bunch of people, I'm just going to adopt the machine sooner. You want a smooth transition where these jobs taper off one by one and are easily reabsorbed into the economy.
Yeah, I mean, he also he talks a lot about the wealth inequality. I mean, he highlights that there's going to be massive wealth inequality. What is the obsession that progressives and the left have with wealth inequality, as opposed to, I mean, what do I care whether or not Sam Harris is making 10 times the amount of money that I'm making, or whether Bill Gates is making, you know, thousands of times more money than I'm making, provided that, you know, my standard of living is good and getting better. You know, does it come from this idea, you know, this zero-sum game where there is only X amount of pie, and the more pie Sam Harris gets, the less pie I get?
Well, I think to some people it's unpalatable, the idea that someone's going to be a billionaire while there's people starving in the world. But this overlooks a couple of things. Well, the first...
I mean, do they have less of a problem if there's more people with £1,000 in their pocket, yet there's people starving in the world? I mean, what's, you know...
Inequality isn't a measure of whether people's standards of living are getting better. For example, in South Africa, when millions of blacks came out of poverty, that created a massive inequality figure, because there was a bunch of blacks that were still in poverty. So inequality is a very inefficient poverty is more important than inequality. And in 2015, we celebrated for the first time in history less than 10% of the world's population in poverty. Now, there's two misconceptions here. The first one is that some people are poor because other people are rich. But most people who get rich, now obviously there's crony capitalists and people who the government gets in bed with big business to bias the member. There are undeserving rich, but most people who get rich do so by developing products that before only rich people could afford, but they develop them to the point where regular people can buy them, and that's where they get their massive wealth from selling that product to countless number of people who choose that product because they believe it will increase their standard of living. So the fact that we brought, you know, computers were once tens and thousands of dollars, your Steve Jobs, your Bill Gates, they became rich by making those products affordable to regular people and massively increasing everyone's standards of living. Now, if you'd gone back to the Industrial Revolution, when for the first time in history you got the self-made man who created a factory. Before that, it was only aristocrats whose family had been rich, whose family's family had been rich all throughout history. Now people got rich by being a factory owner. And you said, well, this is really unfair. The workers, as you know, people like Charles Dickens illustrated, are living in squalor and their employers are rich. If you'd redistributed the wealth of those employers, maybe everyone in Europe would have got a table leg, an extra table leg, but you wouldn't have seen the increase in capital development because those capitalists invested their wealth in more factories that brought more stuff onto the market, and then because there was more stuff, the price of those goods went down, so more people could afford it, and it increased people's standards of living and increased people's standards of living to the point that we are now. Now that is what they really need in the third world. They need that capital investment. They need to open up their markets. So your people like Bill Gates or whoever's the richest people in the world, what are they doing with that money? They're not just sitting on it. They're investing it in the stock market. Who chooses which of those investments succeed and which ones fail? The consumer, which is all of us, regular people. If Bill Gates does not put his investments to work for regular people, those companies that he invests in will go out of business and he'll lose all his money.
Yeah.
The market stewards that wealth into the hands of the people who are making wise investments and investing in things that people actually want to choose to buy, regular people. And this idea that there'll only be a few trillionaires who own all the machines is nonsense, because how are they going to make that money if everyone else is poor?
Yeah, and more importantly, what are they going to spend it on?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, what are they going to do with it? Am I going to buy a Laird jet off you and then, you know, you buy it back off me because we're the only two trillionaires? Like,
yeah.
Supposing we do buy all the machines have to be making stuff
Yeah.
for regular people. Otherwise, there's not even any point in buying them. Like, and that is how...
Unless you've got some sort of machine fetish.
So, I'm sure we did an episode on sex robots, so you never know.
Check it out, yeah.
But I have to say, I don't think, unless you've got some style of 1984 government, but in 2100,
yeah.
I don't see this plutocracy of a few trillionaires being realistic. Because the only way there can be trillionaires is if your average person is earning upwards of $100,000 and so forth, so that there's enough people with that kind of income to be buying the stuff to bump it up to the trillionaires. I don't think that's likely to happen. There gets a point where there's not enough stuff to invest. There needs to be a lot of wealth for people to even be trillionaires. So,
well, it's like, I mean, even if you look back to the days of slavery in America and slavery even in ancient Rome, where it got to that critical point where there was that many slaves that there was nobody sort of consuming anything because they didn't have any money. You know, nobody had any money to actually spend on anything. So the guy who owns a business or owns a shop or who's a trader has got nobody to sell his stuff to because everybody's a slave. You know, so if there is that disparity that Sam Harris is talking about, where you've got these trillionaires and everybody else has got nothing, then it's not going to work for the trillionaires either, really.
Yeah, what are they going to do? So, basically, I don't think it's a realistic vision. As we've seen throughout history, automation has massively increased the wealth that regular people have while reducing the number of hours that they have to work. And it should continue to do that, provided we have a relatively free market, which makes it easier. Plus, because it's a relatively free market, everyone that's on a regular income can employ a gardener, can employ their own chef. You know, it's not like we're running out of things that I would like other people to do for me. Like, everyone would like to have a butler, you know. Yeah. And if all the service jobs and all the factory jobs are automated, then we get to the point where we've got a culture where people are paying other people to do stuff from them, you know. It won't be expensive for you to invite a band over to play at your wedding or just your friend's birthday.
Yeah.
You know, it now becomes inexpensive to do that because all of the...
because the cost of living is coming down for
and if
everybody.
the government wants to help, the only thing it can do is A, get out of the way, and B, fix the schools, you know, give people... Because right now, we're just filling people's heads with information. They don't need information. They've got Wikipedia. You need to teach people how to learn, how to develop skills, because there's people coming out of the education system 11 to 13 years that can't even get a minimum wage job. And that is because of government. It's not because of the market.
And it's not because of automation.
No, it's certainly not. So
what about this point he makes about where did he go next? What was his next
one is
his
this
next fallacy
idea of decoupling work from a claim on existence, and no one that basically translates as people who are doing stuff for other people should admit a lower standard of living to pay for people who aren't doing things for other people. I say that is the toxic concept, because see, if you cannot earn on your own by creating something that other people want to consume, you're going to spend your whole life as a beggar, dependent on someone else, dependent on the government. And if the government decides they don't like your politics, they can cut you off. If the government goes bankrupt, you're finished.
Yeah.
If you know the governments decide they don't like your color of skin, anything about you, this is going to lead to some kind of episode of the Twilight Zone where everyone's on a basic income and no one has any skills, and the government becomes totalitarian because they know that people are dependent on them.
Yeah.
And we've got an episode on universal basic income. It's our best viewed episode. So if you've not checked it out yet, please by all means check that out. And I go through some of the economic problems with the UBI.
Yeah. Well, he calls, he says we need to get away from this idea that redistribution of wealth is a toxic, toxic notion or toxic concept. Well, I think it is a toxic concept. I mean, redistribution of wealth is just a fancy name for theft, really. As far
Right.
As, yeah.
Right, and if people got their wealth in a crony capitalist way by being in bed with the government, then we need to decouple government from the corporation and stop having this round robin of people from corporations becoming lobbyists, going into Congress and then going back into corporation.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the government has the ability to pass regulations that create monopolization of markets that is the problem. Because on a free market, the only way to gain resources is by creating something that other people want. But as soon as you can gain more resources by lobbying the government than by serving your customers, newsflash, that's what you're going to do. Because if you don't do it, someone else will do it. So as soon as you have the situation where the government can choose winners and losers, capitalists are going to exploit that instead of serving their customers.
And when they talk about redistribution of wealth, it also seems to be it's always somebody else's wealth. It's the next guy up. You know, it's that next guy, not me. The guy who's earning more than me. You need to redistribute his wealth. And the fact of the matter is, okay, these trillionaires that you, by his own admission, he says, oh, there's maybe 2 or 3 trillionaires. Okay, once you're done with their money, where do you go next? And added to that, simply redistributing money in of itself does not create wealth. Because if the world is awash with money and there's nothing to buy with it, there's no stuff, there's no product, there's nothing to consume, then that's not going to make people any better off.
Yes, what they need to be doing is investing that wealth, and the best thing is if the poorest countries in the world open up to foreign investment so people can come in and set up factories there, take advantage of the cheap labour, to sell products to the West so that working class people in the West can get all their stuff cheaply from the third world, send their money to the third world. Once the factories are established, the people in the third world now have skills, they have infrastructure, they have they build their own local ancillary companies. This is how Bangladesh and Indonesia and what have you have seen massive increases in the level of living standards in their country, whereas Cuba or Venezuela maybe had similar living standards before they embraced communism to what they have now, whereas the living standards in Europe has shot up the way, whereas Cuba had a similar living standard to Europe at the time before the revolution, but it has stagnated because there is no capital investment. So what you need is, you don't need to give the third world a handout. There's a documentary called Poverty Inc. that shows how foreign aid has not really helped the third world. In fact, sometimes it was damaging. Sometimes, you give foreign aid or you dump food on the third world thinking we're going to feed those starving people, and all that happens is the farmers who live there go out of business, so you actually set them back instead of helping them. What they need is us to not be so selfish and say, oh well, we can't from the third world because then our farmers will go out of business. No, we need to say we should be able to import products from wherever we want, and we should be able to send our money to the poorest places in the world to help them develop. And that will help us, because once the third world becomes wealthy, they will get universities, they will get intellectual class, they'll start inventing things. Right now they're not inventing things because they've got a subsistence lifestyle. But when the poorest countries in the world become rich, they get leisure time, they get intellectuals, they get inventors, they get capitalists.
Yeah.
And just in the same way that we benefit from anything invented in America, and America benefits from anything invented in Europe, we will also benefit from the developed world developing and becoming innovators.
Yeah.
So it's win-win. The universe is beautifully engineered, designed, some would say, evolved, some would say, but evolved in accordance with laws. And there are economic laws, and they say that if you both are voluntary in a transaction, both parties benefit. But if you use force, only one party benefits. So talking about using force...
Well, yeah, I mean, what's your take on... He mentions subsidies, and he mentions subsidies to carbon industries, and he also mentions subsidies to solar industries. Now, why is subsidising solar power a bad idea?
Well, the first case, it's immoral to steal from people to give it to a bunch of capitalists.
Yeah.
The second thing is that it was also counterproductive because it subsidises not developing the product better. So if you've got a solar power...
But I guess they would argue that they wouldn't have developed it at all if it hadn't, because the market didn't see any need for this. It was government who saw the need for solar power and put the investment in there.
I'm not sure that how true that is, but even if it was, this was under the... this is because the nuclear industry and the fossil fuel industry were under the auspices of government,
Yeah.
and were getting massive handouts for government. If they weren't, then that technology would be more expensive, which would incentivize the development of solar panels. Now, if I've got a solar panel that is not economically viable, but the government subsidizes it to just push it over the edge,
Yeah.
so that people will buy it, then I've not got the incentive to develop the technology
Yeah.
further so that
Yeah.
people would buy it anyway. What's more, supposing the government spends £1 billion or dollars on buying people solar panels, if next year someone builds a slightly better solar panel, slightly
Yeah.
cheaper, then we've just wasted £1 billion because we can't tell the future. Now, I believe in solar energy. I believe that it's coming down in price by 4 to 6% a year, and Tesla are now bringing out these solar powered tiles
Yeah.
that will replace your roof tiles. As soon as these become commercially viable, as soon as the technology is there, it's going to be like the internet. Everyone's going to have them on their roof, but you cannot speed up progress in an inorganic fashion.
Unfortunately, Elon Musk of Tesla has jumped on the government bandwagon and
yes.
started to take government subsidies.
He's a crony capitalist. I like the guy.
Yeah.
I think he's
Sold out.
He's his heart's in the right place, but shame on you.
Yeah.
You do not accept theft of other people's money. If you want to develop those products, go out into the market and seek investment. You're a rich man. You have no right to tax middle-class people to develop your products. Do not be a pig at the trough. You do not need that government money. Take it out of your own pocket.
Well said, sir.
So, okay, let's tell them about the transformation of American law, because Morton J. Horowitz, an economist, wrote a 2-volume treatise about the transformation of American law. And what Sam Harris is talking about is externalities.
Yeah.
If I sell you a car, you might benefit from the car, I might benefit from selling you it.
But somebody else's health might... But yeah, okay.
Yeah, from the pollution.
Well, yeah.
Right?
But he's talking about instituting a carbon... He says in there, it's best to have a carbon tax. Well, that's idiotic, because he admits himself that the carbon industry is heavily subsidised. What in the name of God is the point of subsidising an industry on the one hand and then taxing it, and especially punishing the consumer with tax on the other hand? Just stop subsidising it. Then it'll cost what it's supposed to cost. You know, then your fuel for your car, then your gas prices will go up massively, and then people will say, okay, now we have to really look at the alternatives because we can't afford to pay this. So there's no point in subsidising that. However, I think what Antony's talking about is the one point, you know, any industry, be it the railroads or factories, the externalities of that factory. Let's look at a simple example. If that factory was producing smoke and that smoke blackened the washing that was hanging on your line, you could go to civil court and say, this factory has caused me harm, injury or loss. In this case it would be loss, because you spent money to wash your clothes, then they got blackened, then you had to wash them again. When you tried to dry them outside, you couldn't do it because of the blackness of smoke. And that's just the washing. That's not thinking about what's going into your lungs and what's going on to your garden and all the rest of it. So they could go to the court and say, this company with this factory that's blackening my washing has to pay to get this cleaned. And that made their product cost more, and that cost got passed on to the consumer. So they have to find a way of making it cleaner, or they'll go out of business. What the government did is stepped in and took a utilitarian approach and said, well, look, this is about the collective. It's not about you, you selfish little individual. All you give a monkey's about is your poxy washing. Who cares about your washing? You know, there's greater things to be thought about here. This factory produces wealth. It gives work to people. You know, people work in that factory. It's good for the community. And, you know, frankly, that outweighs your individual rights. And if we'd have just stuck to that, if government hadn't have interfered and allowed people to sue factories, then, you know, our energy would be probably a lot cleaner by now. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. So what you have a case is, under common law, if someone created harm or loss to your person or property, you could go to a claims court and sue them for compensation. But then the collectivists came along and changed the law so that it was all about the common good, the common good,
the greater good.
And now the collectivists are telling us individualists, us libertarians, that we don't care about the environment, where it was your collectivist form of law, your legislation and statutes that superseded the common law, which put the individual first. As for your excellent illustration of the, subsidizing something after and then taxing it. That's kind of like supposing you went to the doctor and you were massively overweight. Instead of getting you on a diet plan and helping you take exercise and stop all the boozing or smoking or whatever your unhealthy habits are, he gives you some diet pills, and then you get a headache and you get sent to the neurologist for the side effects, and then those pills screw with your hormones and you need to go to an endocrinologist and you get more pills. This is what happens with government programs. They create unintended consequences, and then you need a government program to deal with the unintended consequences and the unintended consequences. So that is just silly. Stop the crony capitalism. Stop using public money to subsidize capitalists.
Yeah, because I mean, it's fine to say, well, look, solar power is clean and it's good for the planet, therefore we should do it. I mean, we think that now. I mean, I don't know the resources that go into creating solar panels, but there may be something out there that is far cheaper, far more efficient, and will be far more beneficial. Yet it's just not happening because the government is subsidising solar panels.
Yeah, so actually what this just means is we need to have a little bit of humility and say that we as individuals, and certainly the central planners in government, do not know better than the combined genius of humanity. And if you make it an even playing field, if you make it a free market where all the externalities are accounted for, all the costs of production are accounted for, then you have an even playing field which counts all the factors, and the best technology will win out over time, because that will be the one that is the cheapest and the most efficient. So Murray Rothbard, the great libertarian philosopher and economist, said, "It is no sin to be ignorant of economics. After all, it is a highly specialized field, but it is wrong to loudly and vociferously voice opinions without a basic grounding in the economic understanding that you need to have to promote those policies." Sam Harris, big respect for a lot of the work that you've done. I think you're an intelligent guy, definitely a thought leader in this day and age. You've got a massive audience. I think 300,000 to 400,000 or more people tuning.
They deserve better.
And I would like you to get some grounding in economics. And you're welcome to come on our show, or bring us on your show to discuss this further. Would love to debate it. To any Sam Harris enthusiasts, thank you for listening to our show. Please, to all our listeners, tweet this podcast to Sam Harris. He's got a good record of replying to critics. And do you know what? For all I know, he knows better than us, or some of his fans know better than us. You can come and correct us, correct Ludwig von Mises, Hayek, Murray Rothbard.
Yeah, Murray Rothbard. Yeah, I recommend this.
Say the name.
Murray Rothbard is called "What Has Government Done to Our Money?" It's a good start for anybody who wants to get into the genius that is Murray Rothbard. Check out this book. Check out Sam Harris. Check out anything by Murray Rothbard. Check out anything by Mises, and because your fans, the people who listen to you, actually deserve more. They deserve some, for you to have actually researched it properly, instead of just coming out with, the usual tropes that are just regurgitated without any real thought by the progressive left.
Yes, and I know that these views are superficially plausible. They sound credible. You think the machines are going to take away the jobs. Well, there's strong arguments against it. We've outlined most of them. There may be some more.
I mean, just as a thought, I used to be involved in the transport industry, and Sam Harris spoke about the 9 million jobs that are involved by mainly white males, but we all know though they deserve to die horribly anyway, because they're responsible. Joe Rogan pointed out in that interview, we are the patriarchy. However, I used to be in the transport industry, and it's perfectly possible, especially with truckers, that when AI takes over the driving of that truck, it doesn't necessarily mean that the trucker will be out of a job. His job will just change. He will be basically the second man in that truck. While the AI is driving, it gives the trucker who's going to take over if the AI breaks down, or if it gets a puncture, or if something goes wrong with the engine, it's easily repaired. Well, that guy can jump out and do it. He's also there to unload the truck at the other end, or help unload it. He's got to get in the back there and manipulate the pallets about so that the machine can come on and get them off. So while the AI is driving that vehicle, the trucker can be sleeping, he can be having his lunch, so the stuff gets there quicker because the driver doesn't have to stop for a break. So AI gets there, the trucker does the secondary work, he still has a job, the job just changes, and that's the way it goes. Yeah,
and lots of jobs that exist now wouldn't exist if not for automation, like a CAT scan attendant, or making a microchip, or programming AIs. So,
well, there'd be no reason for truck drivers if nobody had invented a truck.
Right, which is technology and automated.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in, especially you Sam Harris enthusiasts who haven't watched the show before. Please tweet this podcast to Sam Harris so that he can check out the arguments and correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah, and just get it right. Don't misquote us, because like David Coverdale, we hate to be mistweeted.